My name is Maria Malomalo. I'm the Senior International Research Manager for Restless Development, a Pan-African feminist, and the founder of Mwanapo in Angola. I started involving myself in community engagement. I think it was some 5-6 years ago when I started Mwanapo in Angola. So Mwanapo in Angola is an NGO which focuses on adolescent and youth sexual and reproductive health and rights. So it works around child marriage, teenage pregnancies, STIs, family planning. So it's basically a sexual and reproductive health organization. So we were conducting a research around child marriage. And one of the things we wanted to capture the voices of young women and girls. But when we tried doing that, the community was a bit rebellious because they felt that it's a traditional issue and you're not supposed to be talking about it. And it was at that point that I actually realized the importance of engaging the community even before you start doing research, explaining to them the purpose of that research and how it will benefit both the community and the individuals within that community. So we then came up with a whole different way of doing it. Instead of just capturing the voices of the young women and girls, we realized that they operate within an environment which has everyone, basically. So we adopted the socio-ecological model where we actually went into the community, spoke to them, and tried to get an understanding of how they feel we should be conducting the research. And yeah, so it has defined who I am to this day. When I moved to Restless Development, it became an opportunity to use those skills because I lead the youth-led research approach, which is basically working with young people to conduct research across different countries and on different topics. I think like anyone who has a certain level of privilege and has achieved a certain level of education, you'd be thinking, how can a young person from rural Zambia actually conduct research? What do they know about research, right? But I then realized with time, and I actually visited rural Zambia and did some work with young people. And it was fascinating that the same research questions I was thinking were the ones that they brought out. But of course, the way they say them is quite different from us, right? Because we use all these complex terminologies and they make them as simple as possible, right? But it really made me realize just how important young people's perspectives in terms of research are and why we should continuously involve them. And the information that you get when you conduct youth-led research is quite different from what you get when an adult is leading the process, because it's easier for a 15-year-old to speak to an 18-year-old about issues that affect them than it is for a 15-year-old to speak to a 30-year-old. So really recognizing how the issue of power that we're talking about, the power dynamics when it comes to the researcher and the respondent, how does that come into play and how does it affect even the content of the research that we carry out? I feel that there's a general understanding or increased understanding of the importance of community engagement. And I've seen it in most instances where research is carried out. People have started understanding why it's important to engage the communities, and in some instances to actually co-design the research with the communities. And for me, that's like one of the biggest successes that I've seen when it comes to community engagement. It's very difficult. I think if we look 10 years back, 5 years back, we didn't have a lot of discussion around community engagement. But now there's a growing realization of how communities can actually provide sufficient information and can be sort of a success factor in the research that one conducts, which is very interesting. But at the same time, I've also realized that we still have a lot of issues when it comes to power imbalances within the research ecosystem in the different communities, because you find that researchers are probably put on a different level compared to the communities. And that's a big issue, which I feel that needs to actually change as we are discussing issues around community engagement. But also understanding that communities bring in a certain level of knowledge, while the academics bring in the academic knowledge and experience. Communities bring in the specific lived experiences that enrich whatever research that you're conducting. So I think it's something that needs to be evaluated and that we need to reflect on. Even within the whole ecosystem of the community, you have the community leadership, you have the community members, you have the children, the women. So understanding that the different roles that they play and the richness in the different information that they bring to the table is very important. Obviously, what then it needs to change would really be dismantling the power structures and ensuring that we have genuine conversations around where power is located. As we are speaking of research, where is the power located and how can we actually work to ensure that we shift power from those traditional sources of power. So one of the things that needs to happen when we talk of community engagement is to actually stop talking about engagement, right? And talk about core leadership, talk about core design. Look at it as not engaging someone, but as ensuring that the leadership of that community is reflected in the work that we do. I got involved in the Center for Exchange. There are a number of reasons why I got involved, really. And when I think of it, so many things played in my mind when I saw this opportunity. And the most important for me was that I felt, in a sense, that we needed to have a balance between having research which has academic rigor and as well ensuring that there's community leadership in the process. But as well, a realization that communities alone cannot lead research. They cannot do it alone. And researchers as well cannot do it alone. So how do we strike that balance and how do we bring the two together? This whole process depends on how much power we are willing to cede, how much power researchers are willing to cede. And for me, that's the most important. How much power are researchers willing to cede? How much power are funders willing to cede? And how much power are communities willing to cede? Because this is a process which it's more of a tripartite, right? It involves three actors. So understanding how much power each party is willing to cede is very important. And at the heart of everything that we are doing is understanding those power structures and how they then define the knowledge exchange. So it's really a cocktail of power. And we need to sort of identify all those power structures and dynamics for us to be able to create a model which really works. But as well, I'm also a big believer in intersectionality. I love intersectionality and how the different identities that we have actually have an impact on how we experience life. So that also encouraged me to be part of this process because I wanted to bring that perspective into it. How do we create a center for exchange or exchange processes, information, research exchange, which actually celebrates the diversity that we have in the communities and in the room? How do we bring that together? How do we ensure that even as we are conducting research, we understand the complexities within the communities? As we are developing these models, we understand those complexities and see how we can include them within our work. So, yeah, that's why this really spoke to me. I would want to see a space which foregrounds respect, mutuality, inclusivity, and of course, power shifting. A space which recognizes the power of the different actors and also ensures that no one is left behind. I'm actually visualizing it in my head. A lot of activities going on, but not really focusing on research alone, but also seeing how young people can get information relating to the research in a way that appeals to young people, whether through comic books, but a space which is not limited by age, because often we create these spaces where only adults can go. But I envision a space where even children can go and learn more about the research is happening within their communities, because it should be a space which fosters understanding of research from a very young age. For me, with time, we don't necessarily need a center for exchange with time, right? 10 years, 20 years down the line, we should be able to say the communities and the researchers naturally understand their roles within a research process and naturally interact without us creating such spaces. So, yeah, for me, that's what it looks like.